Hey everyone, welcome back to the Couples Therapist Couch. This is Shane Burkle, and today I'm speaking with Christa Hardin, therapist, host of the Enneagram in Marriage podcast, and author of the book, The Enneagram in Marriage. Hey Christa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Shane. This is one of my favorite shows. I am geeking out to be here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you. And you have a huge podcast. I want to learn more about that. But why don't you tell everyone a little bit more about all the things that you do?
Oh, thank you. Well, I've been working with couples for about 2 decades. I started out as a marriage and family therapist, trainee in the Chicago area, moved to Southfield, Michigan, near Detroit, and worked for a few years in independent practice and started to grow my family more. My husband, Wes, and I went to grad school together. Then he went to medical school to be a PA. And now we have 3 kids. And in the midst of all that, I realized I really liked private practice for all of the flexibility it offers me as a parent. So I feel like I get to, as many of you probably do, live in the best of both worlds. But couples have been a passion of mine ever since I was a little girl, even literally giving my parents advice and slipping notes under their door to each other when they were having an argument. And yes, I have had therapy for that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of therapists, right? They found from a young age they wanted to help others. And I know what you mean about needing therapy after situations like that, you know?
Right. Because you're like, I'm fawning in order to make sure nobody fights. And then you're like, oh, I'm a peacemaker. And so there's all those elements. But when you find out you have a true problem solver gift, which I think us couples helpers do, regardless of your past, right?
Think about it like there's 2 sides to that coin, right? It develops a lot of strengths within you. It's important to notice your growth areas too.
Yeah, I love that. And the Enneagram has been such a great tool to help me to nuance, to even see, oh, I was made this way and this is why also. And here's what was going on with my parents and my high school friends and then, my clients. It gives me not just the general amazing tips we all get from the late Sue Johnson and Gottman and IFS and all the other great systems out there, but it also helps to nuance by the personality, which I have found incredibly helpful when one system or tool doesn't work for one, but it does with another.
Yeah, that's great. And I really want to get into giving people a little bit of background information about the Enneagram. I remember the first time that I heard about it and I took the test and I found out what my number was. And it just felt like reading through that, it just felt like I feel seen, or I feel like, oh my gosh, it makes sense. Like I am the way that I am or something. There's something very almost a sense of relief, when you take the test and you start understanding what the Enneagram is all about. But why don't you tell everyone a little bit more about what it is if they haven't even heard of it before?
Yes. Well, the Enneagram is comprised of 9 different personality types, numbered 1 through 9. And it really is a personality type structure. You can see it as a physical map. There's a diagram of it. But even just in your mind right now, just think of 9 different personality types representing different strategies people develop. We know the nature nurture argument is there, but largely in childhood otherwise to cope with life. And we each have different motivations, fears, and desires that drive behavior. So even if you grew up, of course, in the same family system with your siblings, you probably have different personality types because we know that every system within even a family is going to be a little different per generation, per age, per birth order. And so it's a beautiful way to distinguish, this is me, this is my shadow, but here's my gift too. And for instance, I'm a type 7 on the Enneagram, and I thought maybe it was just because I had done some helping with my family to keep things light. But what was so interesting to me, Shane, was that I read my baby book not long ago, and I saw my mom said, baby Christa is so joyful, which is the 7. And so it was fun to see some of this is just innate, right?
You don't have to go through all of them, but what are some of the examples? Like there's the joyfulness, the playfulness, risk-taking. I don't know, but there are attributes that have to do with each number. As you're talking about, there's these 9 different types. It's amazing to me. I mean, there's pages and pages written about each number that can describe, this is what this person looks like. This is how they deal with stress. This is what they do when they're happy. This is, all these different things. But each one sort of, would you say, has a label of who it is?
Yes. And because there's even subtypes within each of these 9 types, it's important that people notice the core motivations of their type before they just say, oh, for instance, type 1, the perfectionist usually is the title, but some people prefer the word refiner or reformer when they know the core issue with 1 is feeling bad or not good and wrong. Then they realize, oh, yeah, that is my core fear. And my desire is to be good and right and to be that good boy or good girl, compliant in culture. And so, as we know, there's a lot of people who struggle with that in general, but then there's even another group of people where they would say, yeah, that is my defining most important thing is that I do the right thing. In fact, I'm married to somebody who is identified as a type 1. And so we're more than our type and we have the capacity for all 9 types. And that's so important for people to hear. But each one does have a general place and name that goes with it so that it gives us a bit of a shorthand.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. There might be 2 people who both test in the same number, could have very different things about them. I've worked with people who sort of felt like, oh, well, I'm this number and that's bad. And my partner's this number and that's good. That's not fair. Like, right. And it's more like each number has tons of great things about them. And obviously a lot of areas that might be weaknesses or growth areas or something like that as well, that all the numbers have those things.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. And as we know, as couples helpers, even within our own marriages, our tendencies are to be that we're a bit of the hero, our partner's a bit of the villain. And so we have that fundamental attribution error that says, I'm going to do a quick heuristic. And I think it was because I yelled at you because I was tired, or I ignored you because I didn't feel well. But when you did it to me, it was because you have the bad Enneagram type. So I like how you just notice like every type has gifts, every type has shadows. We're all on even playing fields.
Absolutely. So I want to let you sort of lead. I mean, I don't know if you wanted to go into describing each number, if that would be helpful, or if you would prefer to sort of start off in a different way, talking about, kind of explain the Enneagram to everyone.
Oh my gosh, that's a wonderful idea to go through the 9. And we can do this briefly, but it's really helpful for the coaches and counselors listening to know their own type 2 versus just trying to drive in, because I teach coaches how to work with the Enneagram. And as we all know, our transference and countertransference is so real. So as I go through the 9 types, be listening for what you think your core motivations and types might be. Does that sound good?
That's great. And I love that you just said that, because I was thinking about it like, oh, I want to figure out the types for my clients because that's going to help them in their life and their relationship. But that's so important too for us as the coaches or therapists to sort of start with ourselves and to figure out like, how does this influence how I'm showing up in my work and in my life?
Oh my gosh, yes. And I think about it all the time. Like, if I can get a hold of my number and do better, then I can be much more successful in my business. And I think the success I have had is because I have grown through some of the aches and pains of my type. But I want to even do more, as I know we all do. So that's why I'm excited to do that. So yeah, thank you for saying that. We got to talk a little bit about the type 1. So some of you probably resonated with that as a very core type, to say I lean toward perfectionism, judgment. And the good news about 1s is that they can be very fair and judicious. And so in that way, they really have a gift for justice fighting. And when something happens to someone they love, they have an important role in society to fight for that. I would imagine a lot of our Supreme Court justices, presidents have that oneness to them when they're healthy, of course. And I think that there's a lot of people who in society are in fields like my husband's medicine, where he saved lives because he's like, oh, I saw somebody's neck and it was, pulsing in a certain way, and I knew they needed to go right to the hospital. And so I think that that's a beautiful gift of 1s. What my husband and many 1s have come to learn is they need to have a little bit of body work and to digest some of their justice fighting when they come home to their spouses. So by the time we see them with their spouses, if they're not doing that, there's usually some indignancy, some anger, and sometimes it goes towards themselves as a self-perfectionism and not their partner, but usually a little bit more out at their partner. So that's our type 1.
And that's so cool. Like, they can be really stressed or hypervigilant, which if I'm in surgery, I'm hoping that my doctor is going to be hypervigilant about what's happening to me, right? Like that's a good quality. We all have these things about us. You just have to be careful of the flip side of that. If I'm constantly in the world in that way, there are definitely opportunities for me to learn how to decompress more.
Yes. Yeah. My husband says that people have taught. One time nurses at another job had said, we think you come in with a bit of arrogance. And it's actually it makes me feel so safe when he admits to that to me and the kids, because we have our oldest is almost 20 now. Our youngest is 13. And when he says, hey guys, if I ever come off with too much of an edge, tell me. And it's so hard for ones to say that because they think if they're wrong, then they're bad. So it's a journey. So type 2s are our helpers, givers. I think there's a ton of therapists who are 2s. I have 2 2s on my team of counselors at my counseling center that I own. And there are just so many others who have taken my course. 2s are just such natural befrienders, givers. They have hearts of love. Whereas I talked about the one having justice, the next 3 types, in fact, 2, 3, and 4, are all big heart types. And so 2s come in with emotions and they can feel the feeling clients. So if that's you and you struggle with boundaries and you struggle with saying no, and sometimes you get very codependent and can say yes, it's probably because you're a 2 and because you feel like in order to have worth, I have to be giving at all times. And that's another job people can do. Teachers, animals. I know my best friend who's a PA in a hospital is a 2. It's a great, wonderful personality, but people take advantage of 2s. So just a reminder, if that's you, set your boundaries. You are worthy of self-care. And your clients who are 2s are going to need to learn that as well. So that's our 2s. Yeah, shall I go on to 3?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to say, I remember a 2 that I knew. It was very hard for them to understand why nobody was coming to help them. They had this mindset where they always wanted to help everyone. And they're like, well, how come other people don't see the world in that way? And they wanted people to know to do that without asking for what they wanted. Yeah,
they have to learn that. I'm so glad you brought that up. As you said, there's books and books of things for each type, but that is a pivotal piece, is them directly asking and not going along the side and manipulating to get what they want. So, and you know what? If somebody says no, it's okay, because you're learning self-care too. So our 3s are achievers and performers. They love the center stage. They thrive in it. They are so gifted with goal getting and doing a ton and being at the top of an organization. If they're not at the top of an org, they will be, and they will probably become a consultant soon after that and just stop working for another org and start their own business. So it's a beautiful thing to see and to witness. And they don't just want it for themselves. They truly love others. They want to see others succeed. They name drop. They love their bling. They're often matching suits if they're couples. They're like, oh my gosh, we have to coordinate our outfits for this New York trip. I just heard a 3 saying that. And they do want the credit, but it's not because they're trying to be greedy. They can struggle with vanity. Remember, we said each type has a shadow, but part of it is that they do just want love through their performance. And so they come to learn as we get healthier, that we need to be loved for who we are authentically, even when we're not perfect, polished, when we make mistakes, when we're not on the stage, but in the audience, and when we're just being and not doing. That is the lesson for all 3 therapists and clients. If you do have any 3 clients, they usually try to take over the therapy a little bit.
I can just picture it as you're describing it. Were you also saying it's a little bit like what I would call performance-based esteem? Like I'm enough and I matter as long as I'm successful in the world, and they have a hard time slowing down and just feeling like it's okay to relax and slow down?
Absolutely. And they can, out of all the types, I feel like, of course, a generalization, but just out of the many couples I've worked with and interviewed, 3 seem to struggle a bit more with premarital affairs because they can wear a lot of masks. They can read the room too, like 2s, they're that heart type. And so if they're not wanting to be vulnerable and real with their partner, they might offload that onto, well, I'm going to have some arm candy over here and I'm going to look good, even better, and shine even brighter with somebody else. And so when they actually get in, dig in, do the work, look at themselves and how they're loved authentically, slow down a bit, just tremendously hard, and do their work, it's a beautiful thing. It just takes that journey that we all need to go on. And that's what we can help them with. So I'm helping a couple threes through affairs right now. And one of them said, I want to be with my partner because they know the real me. And those people out there, they're always fooled. So interesting. Okay. So fours are melancholic. They're creatives. They're individualists. Those are some of the titles for fours, the artists, and amazing therapists. In fact, it was a 4 who told me to go back to the Enneagram and give it a deeper look. When I first saw my type, I only knew like the quick good thing. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm joyful. And she's like, this would be such a gift to your couples. And 4s will take a long look. They need a lot of time with things in life. They go slow and they sit with people in their pain better than anyone else on the Enneagram. So they, again, make great therapists, probably won't overbook themselves. Where they can get stuck is they are doing inhibited, so they can stay lost in their melancholic thought. And they often struggle with envy because they're also that heart type who is looking for their worth through others. So there's a codependency sort of inherent with 4s. And we could go into why all of these developed the way they did. It's very interesting. We won't today, but there are reasons why 4s usually feel that way. And so you have to work with them to help them to not feel shame and to know their worth, even if they're not unique or special, even if they're just having a bad day and they can't sit with you in their pain, or even if they've been going really slow and they haven't produced any art for a while, because everything 4s do is artistic. So I just wanted to name that. Probably a lot of our listeners are 4s, but one of the biggest things you could do for yourselves would be to you and your partner, or let your 4 clients really take their time, but eventually get everybody some movement. Because when I said they're doing inhibited, that is a great path for them to success, is just taking that first step and getting to that gym or getting into the art, even though it might not be as unique as they wanted, allowing themselves to have sexual intimacy, even though it might not be the perfect moon and stars aligning. That's what I end up talking with a lot of 4s about, is I don't want to have any intimacy unless it's like perfect Edgar Allan Poe night. So it's bringing them into the doing.
That's great. I know you said we probably don't have time to get into it today, but I'm just curious, what are your thoughts about how much of this comes from like nature versus nurture? Basically, like how much of our type maybe is part of our personality from the beginning, but I'm wondering, like, is it our, the family environment and the cultural environment that we grow up in also influencing that?
Yeah, I think that what I'm learning is that we each have a different wiring and epigenetics. It's a great question. And I think that what happens is we're so much less healthy in our personality type if we have more family trauma and drama. So I do think there's an inherent, just as I mentioned, hey, I was a baby and I was having joy already pretty early. And I think that there was already some hard knocks in my life that may have made me feel I had to fight and be optimistic. But as a baby, I think that we all have the baseline of that blueprint, and then we're much healthier as a 3 or a 6 or whatever our type is if we've had really good, stable family in our lives. The more I grow older, the more I see that. Like, I love my kids. I think they're pretty healthy. They'll probably need therapy about me one day, but I'm like, you've had a largely stable life and you're really good students, etc., kind people. But the more I grow older, the more I realize a lot of the people who aren't kind and don't do well just didn't have good environments. So I think they're the same temperament, but less healthy versions, if that makes sense.
Great. Number 5.
Yeah. So our 5s are often introverts. They're called the observers, the researchers, investigators. This is a temperament that loves knowledge, the Sherlock Holmes, if you will, with brilliance, although never fully grasping their own competency and always wanting more information. And so they too, like 4s, can be very doing inhibited. They're identified as that, but they have now entered us into the next 3 types, 5, 6, and 7s, which are our thinking types. And so instead of processing things through feelings in the heart, they process through this brain type of work where it's always that first center of intelligence for them. And in fact, 5s can even be thought of as a brain on a stick, getting locked in. And that's even more why it's important with all their mental tabs open at all times, and the energy that takes, even more important for them to pause, to breathe, and to maybe take a walk around the block after work, do some context switching. A lot of my fives have been so good about telling me how they do that. And it's also extremely hard for fives to talk about their feelings. They're not feelings inhibited, but feelings cost them a lot of energy that they could be using for research. So there's a sense of that's not going to be helpful or logical for me to process with. And some of their partners are okay with that. But when the five disappears, that's typically when I get the calls, because the five is just hovering, burrowing. And the core struggle for the fives is not only competency, but believing that if they do give out, they forget there'll be synergy and they think, I will waste all my energy and I could die. So with these next three types, there's a sense of I need security and safety above all. And as you can imagine, with a heart type needing attention, which often pairs up with a five, now we're getting into the fun stuff of like, that's hard. So that's our fives.
Yeah. I don't know if it's helpful to think about it this way or not helpful to think about it this way, but are there any sort of male female tendencies with these?
Yeah, that is a great question, because any type can be anything on any spectrum. But I do see that fives are more of what we would say a masculine type. And for many women, they would say, yeah, I'm a five and that fits for me. And some might not like that label, but it is very helpful to know that more fives tend to be males. I would say the same for, not just I would say, but I've researched eights as well, which we'll talk about, powerful type ones, that type I mentioned, like my husband. And sometimes it's so fascinating, but as we get more thorough hormone tests, my husband was saying how sometimes people who are in that one space maybe have too much testosterone. I know a type 1 female who's on a testosterone blocker. So just another place for us to explore with our clients. My husband was also telling me that people who test even for testosterone often don't test for estrogen in males, and males even need a little bit of that. And when they don't have it, they have no empathy or ability to want the oxytocin. So I say that on five because I just think that people think sometimes they lack nurture and maybe they're more testosterone driven. So some of this we should look at biologically too, not just psychologically.
Oh, interesting. I love some of the things you're saying as far as like, these are things people should explore for themselves. You know, it's a very non-judgmental way of talking about it. You know, it doesn't mean that you're stuck in this. It doesn't mean there's a problem. This is all stuff to be really curious about. And I just wanted to highlight that. I really appreciate the language you're using when you're talking about it in that way.
You absolutely. And I think that we're all learning through whatever modalities we use. If it's not a fit, don't wear it. But if it is helpful and it's an aha moment, oh my gosh, it can be so helpful. And that's why I moved into Enneagram work after I was and I said MFT in Illinois, but in Michigan, ended up being a psychological assessor. And the 1 out of 20 of us on the team who would get stuck with, and I liked it, but all of the psychological batteries, and it would be just mounds and tests after tests of MMPIs and PhyroBs and whatever else. And Enneagram is so much simpler. And I actually think it goes so much deeper, so much sooner. So I'm glad I'm glad you like that we can use the system to get deeper. So our sixes are another thinking type, and they are really good at security, loyalty, but they're also really good at being skeptical. Some people call them that, the skeptic, the devil's advocate. Sometimes they're just called the loyalist. And there's, of course, as we said, subtypes within each type we won't get into today. But the truth is that sixes are some of the kindest people for supporting those they love. And they will go to bat for you and stay with you, even if you're hard, annoying. So many of us are over-boundaried, myself included. And I always learn from sixes because of the deep way they love, but they are neurotic. And so taking a deep breath around our sixes, taking a deep breath when we're in a six mode is so important because their brilliance, I think that probably comes because they're right in the center of the thinking types. But I think some of the most prolific, brilliant people, in fact, Dan Siegel, who you had on your podcast not long ago, he is a 6 and he is so brilliant, as you know. But he said, hey, when I get tracking into my skepticism or my doubts or overly planning and negatively chaining, it can be a disaster. And that's what we have to work with our 6 clients on, or ourselves, when we get into a 6 mode. I think a lot of us therapists and helpers can do that, where we're like, okay, I have to help my couple. Oh my gosh, I have to troubleshoot. And there's a sense of panic that can come along with that. And that can really throw off your game. So when we're working on our 6 space, it's important to notice, how can I get myself regulated? And that's the work with all of our 6 clients too. Because as you heard me say, this is the person you actually want in a crisis, because they have planned so much, if you can get them past their fear.
Would this be like a good, like, police officer energy?
Yeah, that's a great example of it. When they're healthy, right? If they take it too far, no. But yes, they make such great police officers because they care about doing what is safe and good. And I think that a lot of us think of 6s also as that firefighter energy of, I have so much courage and I'm ready for the fire more than you are. But we have to help our 6s to know, you can do it without me, because often out of all your clients, your 6s are the ones who are going to ask you most, what should I do? Which I know we try to avoid, but even as helpers, we just feel so flattered with that question. And there's such a desire to give them the answer. And so of course, with our 6s, we have to be extra careful because they're so loyal. They're so kind. They're so trusting. We have to help them to find their own voice versus just listening to authority. Yeah, there's so much there, but okay. Our 7s. So this is our joyful type, the enthusiast. You heard me say that about myself, and we have these gifts of, I think, problem solving and being able to look at big systems and to integrate those big systems mentally, because we're one of the thinking types. Now, I don't think an unhealthy 7 does that very well and can be very scattered and just in pure gluttony. And that is the issue with the 7. And once you know these and you're really like, okay, I want to be schooled in this and I want to be better, I don't want anyone to get the impression you don't struggle against your vice. I struggle against gluttony every single day still. And that's being a person in therapy, being a person doing all this work for 20 years. It's just part of my nature is I like doing and I like overdoing. So if I'm going to take a run, I want to go for a long time. If I eat, I want to eat a lot. That kind of thing. I want to watch the whole Lord of the Rings extended version. It's just, you want to do life big. But what 7s have to learn is coming into rest and allowing ourselves not to feel like we have to carry every plate, even if we did in childhood, even if we were the kid like I was who had to help the parents, who had to put the tent up in the rain when your parents couldn't do it, type of stories that most 7s have. It's important that we realize I'm an adult. I'm allowed to pause. I'm allowed to rest. I'm allowed to focus. And those things have gifted me to be able to have written the book you saw, other books. I've also got my next book coming in 2027. And it's neat to be able to say, I can do hard things. If I take my time, I can do them better yet. But of course, 7s can struggle like type 1 with an inner critic where it's like, no, I need to be perfect. I have to keep running all day. And I think by the time you're in your 30s or so, I'm 46 almost. And quite honestly, in my 30s, I fell flat because of course that just doesn't work for that long, right? You have to stop at some point.
Absolutely.
That's our 7s. And our 8s, we're just 2 more types. We're back into our 1, 8s, and 9s, our body types. And I mentioned that 1s needed that gut work. And that's the same thing our 8s need, is to be able to digest the frustration, because they also want justice. And unlike our heart types and our thinking types, the way they find their way in the world is through bringing justice and rightness. And so 8s are scanning for that. And they're great at protecting others. They're strong and they do not want to be overly vulnerable. I had an 8 ask me a question the other day. My husband and I write mystery dinner games also just as a side gig. And she was playing one of them. And I was like neurotic for her. Like, I was like, she's like, oh, I can't print it because my code expired. I'm like, here it is. If you need any help, started to go into that whole 6 thing. And she's like, I've got it. We're good. And so I love that about our eights, where they're just like, I'm good. You don't have to help me. I'm not going to be vulnerable with you, but I might give you a little bit. And so that is something that the more an eight feels safe, of course, in a relationship, and that's our job, is to help them to feel safe and seen. You don't have to be just a leader. You're allowed to be in the relationship, not just over it. It's so beautiful for them. I know my late father was an eight, and before he passed on, he actually publicly told me, I'm sorry I was such a militant general like in our family. I felt like that was the best way to raise you, but I've come to learn I could have been softer. And that was such a gift. I know a lot of people don't get, but it was neat because he had learned his Enneagram type and he was doing his work. So I think our eights will always be strong to the end. He was such a hero, by the way, even the way he passed on, full on, just like, I'm living my life to the fullest. Never told me he was passing on, kind of a person like, just, hey, how you doing, sweetie? It's like they are so strong for others. But what we can gift our eight clients is, wow, you are allowed to be loved too. And we can see your vulnerability. If we don't get to see it, there's going to be some recklessness, because the last thing I'll say about eight is they can be lusty and passionate and prone to extreme anger when they're not healthy. So sometimes I'm also working with eights having had not wanted to tell their family members or spouse, especially, that they were having these thoughts and feelings and vulnerabilities. And now they're in an affair because they bypass the emotional depths. So that's something eights can struggle with also.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing about your dad. I mean, I feel like that's such a good example where, you know, especially in that generation, especially men in that generation, you know, like this feeling that it's just right or wrong. And so there's a lot of energy of like either explaining why I'm right or just not looking into it too deeply if I feel like I'm wrong or something. But I think that with the Enneagram, like you said, like if someone like that can read their type and say, oh my gosh, like there's so many good things about who I am and it makes sense. And I can also acknowledge these weaknesses that I have, and it's okay. And it doesn't have to be that sort of black and white, right and wrong kind of thinking.
It's so true. And I'm so grateful he said that too. But even to the end, he was like, let's go to a basketball game. And he was on hospice. And I remember I was having my kids and I was like, I've got bronchitis coming on. And of course, in the thinking types. And he's like, come on, I'm dying. I want to go to my alma mater basketball game. Anyway, he took me instead to the gun range and archery and the Democratic Club and all these things. We did have a good day, but he was like so annoyed that I wasn't strong enough to just do this with him who was dying. And later I took all my nieces and nephews on both sides of the family to the basketball game in homage. And we were just all like, wow, like we had a hero in the family. So I do want people to know eights get the comment of being an eight hole, but they show us how it's done. So I'm telling you, I have so many stories. Okay. Now nines are a prolific type. And so they are definitely last but not least. Nines are the peacemaker. How many therapists are nines? Oh my gosh, probably half the listeners, because this is what particularly couples therapists, because they love to create peace in systems and they're amazing at it. They're amazing at seeing diplomacy on both sides. They can bring their calm and co-regulate their people, and they take on such a thoughtfulness to them with everything. But remember, I said eights, nines, and ones are all part of that justice triad. So what people often don't know with nines is they have a lot of opinions. They care deeply about doing what's right. And it will vary. Some nines are going to be conservative, some are liberal, and et cetera, and so on. But nines are extremely justice oriented. One of our daughters is a nine, and it's like, you will be hearing from me every day a complaint about something in the world that wasn't fair. So all we want for our nines is to actually share their right actions, share their voices, because unlike the ones and eights who feel so compelled to do it, when nines get all the opinions of others, they can truly forget themselves, get lost in that. And they can also fall asleep to even saying it again and feel like, forget it, must not have been important. And so I just want to encourage everyone with your nine clients, and if that's you yourself, the biggest thing they can also do, being another doing inhibited type, is they can get into action. Even a brisk walk a day can tremendously give them that empowerment of their voice. Or my daughter needed to learn she needed espresso in the morning. It's like she's tired. And that comes from carrying the thoughtfulness of others and being forgotten sometimes. I can't tell you how many times, because she's now got her associate's degree, but how many times we had to fight for her. And now she's a singer at church. She's just a prolific dancer, modern, every different type. But people forget nines to the point that it's ridiculous. Like colleges lose losing their scores ridiculous. So I've now, after living with one for so long, really get why they get forgotten. But when they rise up in their power, people think they're eights. People they think my daughter is not struggling at all. They don't know the story. So if you're a 9 listening, know you have so much power, because not only do you have diplomacy, but you're this strong body type with a voice of care, justice, fairness, and also things to learn. We don't want any types to think they're better than the others, but that's where I just want to land with these types, is 9s exhibit this beautiful ability to see all the types. We just don't want them to forget themselves. And if they're partnered, we want their partner to stay awake to their needs too, because not that 9s aren't important, but their partners typically forget them. So it's important that the partner say, I was forgotten. And that's really hard for 9s, because they want the magical fairy tale we all want, is that our partner would just know it and say, oh, I never forget you and I will never forget you again. But when somebody is that peaceful and exuding that kind of calm vibe, they do get forgotten. It's not because they don't have worth. I often tell my daughter, it's just you make the room so calm. People just love you so much. So you have to get out there and speak up again. So those are the 9 types.
Yeah, that's great. And I was thinking, as you were saying that, in that example, it would be important for a child as a 9 to have parents who are sort of advocating for them or making sure that they have a voice or something. But then my mind went to, are we supposed to type kids when they're still children? Because I also think different childhood phases fit with different numbers, right? So is my daughter a 4 or is she just a 15-year-old girl? I'm not sure which one, so what would you say about using it with children?
I love that question. And it's when everyone started off with Enneagram almost 10 years ago, like modern people talking more about it, it was do not talk about this with kids, until we realize, oh my goodness, we're losing some of the best things we could give our kids. So talk about it with open hands and say, this may just be a developmental moment, but I have some good tips for you if you're stuck in this angsty space as a 4 and you're melancholy. And I think that getting you active and also me listening to you and spending time with you would be such a gift, because, knowing 4s need quality time. What a gift to a parent to know that. And it might not be something a melancholic 4 even knows for themselves, but you can try these things on for size. And 2 of my kids typed pretty early and knew it. And we said that it might not stick, but one of them still doesn't know it. My 13-year-old son, I think he thinks he's a 7, but my husband thinks he's a 6. And he's a bit of a piano genius and actor and that kind of personality with a lot of, fast pace. So he's like, I think I'm a 7, Dad. And we've kind of just allowed it to be, we'll see later.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. You can, whatever you're going through in your life during that time, you can sort of see some of the traits of a certain type and use it to kind of learn from that. And then just be open to, well, maybe this is who I am. Maybe it's not. Maybe as things continue to move forward, I'll learn more about myself.
Yeah, exactly. And our kids are so grateful when we approach it like that, when we say, yeah, that's so fun. You're such a 7 in that way. And my son said that while we were watching Into the Heights last night. He's like, Mom, you and I love all the colorful things because we're 7s. But he also has been saying, I want time with just my dad. And I had a blast on my hiking trip and I never laughed so hard on a weekend. So it's like he wants his soccer team and his dad and all this activity. So we're like, yeah, we see the fast moving 7 in you. But I think when Shane, you can say things like, you don't have to carry the whole family. Like if you have some 7 showing up in you like you do, please know also that you don't have to be the family security, because he said to me once, for instance, we were taking a walk around like a Panera Bread parking lot waiting for the girls. And he goes, I said, what were you doing? And he goes, I was just looking back to make sure there was no bad guys. And I was like, oh, I'm sure there's not. This is a nice place. But he goes, Mom, I always do that. Like you have no idea how often I'm checking for safety. And it was like 3 years ago when he was about 10. So it just showed me there's a hypervigilance that I need to know about. And I think it's that question you asked earlier. We could talk all day and I know we don't have that long, but it's I remember being anxious when he was a baby and it was just a moment. My mom had just passed. There was so much going on. And it's oh, did his nervous system get a bit dysregulated? And did he feel he had to take care of me? And those are things that now I don't try to overanalyze, but I say to him let's just remember some tools for coping when we get anxious. And it just gives me that sense of, I'm glad I know he's a thinking type so I can help him process.
That's great. Yeah. And again, just sort of being curious. It's not like we have we don't have to figure it all out, but just sort of bringing curiosity to it. Like you said, like, there's some reason why he is the way he is, and that it makes sense, and that's okay. And what can we learn about the situation? But I'm really curious. I think people really wonder, how can we think about this in relationships? Like, are there certain numbers that are good partners for each other or not good partners for each other, or just something to learn about every configuration or something like that?
Oh, I'm so glad you did not leave this question on the table. This is rich for this pod. And I love to say, first and foremost, every couple pairing, there's 45 possibilities, has its strength and areas for struggle. And in fact, we create our own light together. That's one of the premises of my book, is that, I had worked with a lot of 2s with 5s, and that was that heart type with the person who wants to pull away into thought. And I saw these 5s going out and serving their communities in ways that 5s don't usually want to do. And I saw these 2s sitting home instead of helping everyone, just sitting home with a book. And I was seeing 3 different couples of those pairings at that time. And I'm like, wow, this pairing is so beautiful in the way that they keep their push-pull, pursuer distancer going. They were so romantic because the 5 knew how to pull away and the 2 knew how to eventually get that nurture balanced. And there were different iterations than I saw in, for instance, like an 8-1 couple, these 2 powerful justice types. And so there's definitely differences, but as you heard me say, there's special gifts, there's special lights that we each cast, and there's special shadows. So in the back of my book, I go through all the 45 possible pairings and the possible lights and shadows they each have and how to work through them in a general way, because of course we all need our own nuanced care. But it is my most fascinating area to see. And I would lastly say around this topic that there's a very common pairing out there, 8s and 9s, the powerful type with the peaceful type, because that powerful type sort of makes room for the 9's voice. And they're both justice fighter. And the 9 just allows the 8 to be who they are without making them be overly vulnerable. And then there's some doozies of pairings where you're like, oh my gosh, like a 2 and a 4 together, 2 heart types can be so codependent if they're not healthy. But if they are, then of course that's not the issue.
That's so cool. So in your book, you go through every combination?
Yes, I do.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's so helpful to just, even for myself, to go through our 1-7 pairing. And it's been so healing for our marriage to have, we do different therapies at different iterations of our marriage when we need a little touch up. But to do the Enneagram was such a game changer for us because we each were in that fundamental attribution error I talked about earlier, where I was like, oh, well, I'm so joyful and I can do so much. And like, what's wrong with you on being so mean? And he's like, I see you doing this as cutting corners and you're too scattered. And, just, I feel like I'm the right one. And then when he learned he was a 1 and I was a 7, it was like, oh my gosh, we have our shadows here. This is embarrassing. And so it gave us this platform to be on that even playing field, which I think honestly our couples need when we help them, is they need to know it's not just your spouse irritating you. It's both of you needing better self-care, better windows of tolerance, and a better management of your gifts, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like I should tell you that I'm also a 7. At least that's what I've tested. I test very high in the 9 as well, but
I thought that too. I was like wondering if you were a 9, and I love that you're a 7 and a 9.
And then my wife is also a 7, but I feel like I see it. I definitely see it, but I also feel like there are a lot of differences between us. So it's interesting to kind of notice those, like to exist in the world in that way, but to have differences in our personality as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I was curious because I was like, he's got such a 9 in the sense of the peace you always bring to your show, but the problem solving you're doing in the way you're a little more assertive with it would lend itself toward one of the aggressive assertive types like myself, the 3, 7, or 8. And some people don't like the word aggressive at all in there. And they're like, no, it's assertive, it's independent, and that's fine too. But I can see that edge in you. And so I love that you are able to say, there's a lot of 7 in me, also some 9. The more you get into Enneagram, you actually usually identify with a few types. Like I consider myself a 7, 4, 9 tri-type. And that's a different term that some people would say, that's just too much. And that's okay. But for your wife and you, even as potentially 2 7s as your lead types, like we said, not for today, but we each have instincts that go with it. That's even a little different. Somebody might be socially wired. Somebody might be self-preserving wired or sexual wired. And those make us just a little different in culture. So that's a part of it. Plus we have other cultural and perhaps other overlays.
Yeah, it sounds like you can get really sophisticated with this. And I've heard like people use the term wings, like I'm a 5 with a something wing. I mean, is that just like another strong, influential number in your personality when they say that?
Yeah. And if you see the Enneagram on the diagram, or even if you pictured it on a chart just as a ruler, just for simplicity, like what number is next to you? And the reason you would want to use a circle is because 9 and 1 are not next to each other, a ruler, but in the Enneagram, they are. So you could be a 1 wing 9, or you could be a 1 wing 2, like my husband. But the goal would be that you would balance out your wings. So some Enneagram specialists like B Chestnut, she's like, I don't like the term wings because I want people to access both. I find them, I think for couples helpers, we're looking for any help we can get. And so if we find out our, client is a 7 wing 8 versus a 7 wing 6, it gives us a lot of information like, oh, they're not only joyful, but they're powerful, or they're not only joyful, but they're probably leaning into negative storytelling more and neuroticism more. And so these little pieces gift us very quickly. And we know sometimes couples are in such a difficult state when they come to us. The more assessing we can do about what might be their deeper stories, the better.
Oh my gosh. This is so great. Just talking to you makes me want to learn more and more. Can you tell everyone about your podcast and your book so that if they do want to keep learning, they can go to those places, or whatever else you want to mention?
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I'm at enneagramandmarriage.com, and you can find my book there, my podcast. I have a freebies page you can find. Courses. We do coaching. I have counselors also on staff. You could become an Enneagram and Marriage certified coach, because I also have a video course for you that I also teach live in January on Thursday mornings if anyone's wanting to do that. And we just have a lot of resources. I even have pairing guides if you don't want the whole book, but you just want to buy your pairing, like a 2 with a 6. We have guides for each type in addition to the book. And then the other place I would say to find me besides the website, which leads to the podcast too, is my Instagram, because I do spend several times a week there giving posts, and it has added up to probably 1,000 different posts over the last year. So I would love for people to find me at Enneagram and Marriage at Instagram also.
Are you posting like 3 times a day? Did you say in the last year?
Oh, no. I'm sorry. I mean like 3 times.
Oh, in the last few years?
Yeah, a few years. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, okay, that would be crazy.
Like, wow, that would be good for you.
Type 7 hyperactivity, right?
But the Instagram is Enneagram and Marriage as well?
Enneagram and Marriage. Yep.
Okay. And then the book is Enneagram in Marriage. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly
people
right.
can find that at Amazon or on your website or wherever.
Yeah. My website, Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble, wherever you buy books. And there's an audio and Kindle version as well.
Nice. Great. Well, this has been so great talking to you, Christa. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I've learned so much, and I can see how helpful this would be for therapists, even just to have a little bit of background information about, or even if they're not an expert yet about it, they could have the couples take one of the tests to find out what they are, and just sort of just bring some curiosity to like, hey, what can we learn from this? Does this feel like it fits for you? And begin, starting up a conversation that'll be helpful for people.
Absolutely. And it can be fun to have that, and just to respect them if they don't want to use it too. That's always so important. So I love just adding one more tool belt for the listeners. Thank you so much. One more tool in the tool belt for all the listeners.
Yeah, totally. All right. Thank you, Christa. I'll talk to you again sometime. Yeah. Take care.
Thank you, Shane.